everyone. Welcome to another edition of Southern Dirt Motorsports. I'm Steve Winstead, along with my co-hosts Tommy Guy and Randall Davis. And today we're coming to you from Northfield Vineyards in Sparta, Tennessee. And today our guest is Mr. Gary Lorance, the son of Lee Earl Lorance. He was inducted in the Upper Cumberland Racers Hall of Fame in 2015. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How many years did your dad race? I remember him at the Sparta Speedway, the new Sparta Speedway, and he was one tough competitor.
He started probably about 1949 or 50, somewhere along in there. And now, when I started, of course, I was born in 50, and I didn't start with him until I was 6 years old. and we started at Manual Speedway. But he had worked up north, and he went to the racetrack at Anderson, Indiana, and he got interested in it somewhere up there. And then when he come back here, and there was a track down on the other side between Manchester and Tullahoma named Dixie Speedway, and he went down there a time or two. And he wound up buying an old car down there. They blowed the motor in, and he drug it back in, and then we got started with that. And then in 57, about somewhere along the lines of 57, they started the track at Mount Memble, and they'd been working on it. I think we got to run one time, maybe, and it's way in the fall. They didn't have no lights up. And then 58 they run, and they didn't have lights in 58, but 59 they got lights, and we got really more into it then.
Yeah.
And so that was one time we got started there. We was well into it then.
Where was the first race that you went with Earl that you can remember, Gary?
I think probably it was the Legion Bowl, Nashville, sometime along Route 53, 4, somewhere along in there. I was about 4 years old, I guess. I had to go, so he always drug me around with him anyway. So
do you remember basically what the cars, how they were built, what they consisted of, the engines and such back then?
Yeah, they was Bob Ruther was there. He had one of the overhead valve flatheads there. He was the fastest. Ardens, yeah. And he had, of course, that's a Marty Robbins, I think, car there. And then Jimmy Griggs and Crash Bond and that bunch was there. The first race I ever been going to, they was there.
That was some tough company there.
Yes, they was.
Bob was one of the bad boys at the time.
Yes.
Bob Ruther was. I know Earl was quite a innovator himself. He knew how to get the best there was. If a flathead had it in it, he knew how to get it out of it.
He was a flathead man now.
Could you share with us, I know he used to race at Burgess Falls, and he had to do a little tweaking up there. Could you share with us what he did to get that last ounce out of his flathead up there?
Well, that flathead was sentimental. It was wherever you went, you had to tune on it. You had to stay with it at all times. And when we run like at Mount Memble, you had like 3 sets of jets you could run there with that 2-barrel. And it was 47s, 8s, and 9s. And then when we went to Cookville, you could run, it was dry up there, and you could run your 49s up there. But when you run at Burgess Falls and it up above that river or above that lake there, if it fogged up, you couldn't even run 2 jets the same size. You had to put a 47 on one side and a 48 on the other side to get that thing to where it really cackled. I mean, and if it didn't cackle in pipes, it just wasn't coming. So, but you had to stay with it. You live with it.
Well, Earl had that figured out. And back in the day of the flathead, there wasn't a big variety of camshafts you could get for them, racing cam. Earl found this guy, and he was good at this. He found this guy out in the country somewhere that knew how to grind cams. Can you tell us the story about that and how that evolved?
We would go over to Chattanooga to how the engines bounce and stuff. Ray Wallace done an engine bouncing over there. And he told us about this guy up there, and it was right there on Highway 60. Really, it's what's Highway 60 now, where you cross the river at. At that time, you had to take the ferry across. But anyway, this guy, we went and stopped at his shop, and he had a shop there. Boy, and he had cars there from everywhere in there. But he had a dirt floor in the shop. He didn't even have a concrete floor. and his name was Ted Lewis, and he made the machine that ground the camshafts. And it was like a tracer, where you put a cam in like a billet, and he put another one in it, and he'd trace one on the other one. And so he was telling us about, now, Ray told us, he said, he probably won't let you have one, so he won't let most people have one. And so we got over there, but he was, done getting bigger and was going to more things too. And he said, I said, you wouldn't let us have one of them camshafts, would you? And he said, well, yeah, I ain't got time to grind you one right now. But he reached over in the corner and he took one and wiped the dirt and the grease off it. And he said, hand it to us. He said, you just take that home and try it right there. He said, that's pretty good little old shaft right there. He said, if that don't do it, said, you come back and said, I'll grind you one of these days. So we didn't need another one. That was it. But the camshaft that he had, he told us then, he said, now, if you ever tear that gear up in front of that, said, you'll have to come back because I'll have to make you a gear. It was 2 teeth off of what everything else was. And I don't know why, but it run. I'll say that for it.
Well, could you tell us a story of how he tried that camshaft out?
Well, him and they, of course, they was getting every camshaft good. Of course, they was always working at that time in the back room of the house, and they worked out there every night on motors and stuff. Don Hobbs was always there, and Don, they'd get another cam, and they'd pull that out, and they'd put another in. And so we got that in, and we'd run it 2 or 3 times. Well, Don got it one, and I think it was a 400 Junior, Escuderon 400 Junior. So put that in and said, we went to the track, and out to Macmillan. Don had an old sedan, we had an old sedan. And so Don said, boy, said, it's flying. He said, it's flying. So he said, now, when we start the race, he said, let me get her strung out 2 or 3 laps. And he said, I'm going to most of you come on. He said, if you got anything, I want you to come on with it. He said, okay. So they run to their 4 laps there, and let's head down the back straight, and Don throw that big arm out, and most of you come on it. And boy, they got to separate it. And he was on it. And right there before they got to the turn, I don't know what Don done. He must have let off or hit the brakes or something. They rammed him in the back end, and so Don went. They just put a brand new signs up around through there, and had Bernard's had a sign up, record service there, and he took the sign out and left the 2 posts standing up, went right through it, and out over the bank, and bounced out there in the thing. We were trying to, we got it back around the record, pulled it around. We were trying to see if the axle bent and everything on it, and line it back up, and but Don's mother now. She was very unhappy with them 2 boys. She come down to the pits, and she straightened both of them out.
Well, share the story with us now about how Earl learned to set a car up to make it handle.
The first 2 years, I guess, or longer, I know Paul Walker told me one time, he said, I believe when he started, that's the worst driver I've ever seen in my life, and said that. So, but the first 2 years, he stayed over the bank more than he was on the track. And he got where was, getting better. So he got where he could pass 2 cars there one time when he was over the bank, come back out in front of them. So, but anyhow, he went over the bank, and it bent the front axle, bent the tie rod on it. We pulled it in, and he said, well, this weren't. He said, the front axle bent back on it. Said, but to get back in the race, we just took and straightened the tie rod up and put it back on, trying to line the front wheels up. And he went back out there in the feature and actually stayed on the track. And that was one thing right there we learned, how to set the car up, because by going over the bank, finally learned how to do that end anyway.
Well, how did he learn to repeat that setup?
Well, we wound up after a year or 2 or 3 somewhere. We bought a coupe. It come out of Nashville. Raymond Stiles had brought it up and run it some, and Raymond run real good with it. And I know it handled good. We'd seen him run at Winchester and all, and it was a good handling car. And Raymond, the old car was pretty rough, but of course Raymond run good enough, had a good sponsor, so he decided he needed a better car. So he got him a slicker car, and I told Dad, I said, that old car handles good. We need that. We need that car. He said, we don't need that. And I said, yeah, we do. Well, we went over. It was over at Cat's house and in the garage over. And it was a new garage. They didn't even have the floor poured. And they'd pull the motor out over there. So we bought the car for $75. And we took it home, and we freshened up a good flathead motor and put in it. And it was during the wintertime. And spring come, first race, we went to up at Claude Rice's up at Cookville. And he had fast time, won the heat race, and won the feature. And I got done. I said, I told you that car was good. And he said, it is. So we come home, we towed that thing home, and we put it in the garage, and then we went to marking and measuring, and we put it against the wall. We'd bring that. We done that all week. And we'd measure from corner to corner, and it wasn't even in line. It was out of line. So, but we put ours out of line too, just like that. So then we had two that would handle good. But actually buying that car, that finished it up. From our own, we could build a car that handled good.
That became your setup criteria.
That was it right there.
That garage floor. Now, I can't let this get by. I need you to share with everyone the story about the 80 over engine that he built that was 60 over.
Well, they built motors every night. They worked on something every night there. I was in there, and he had some stencils that I guess my grandpa brought in from up north when he worked for Warner Gear or something else. But anyway, they started putting a motor together one night, and it was a little 60 over flathead running 1 2-barrel on it back in. Well, he just picked up.
Who was this for?
Don Hobbs.
Okay.
And so he just picked up that stencil and had the pistons sitting in the vise up there and hit them pistons with that stencil, and they made where that 6 set made 8 out of it. And I said, "What'd you do that for?" And he just went to laughing. He just went to laughing. But he said, "Let's see if I can figure out what that is." And so he run a week or two, and sure enough, they protested him up there. And so I said, "Ain't we gonna stay to see what we're gonna do?" He said, "No." He said, "That's more fun. Just go home." Said, "Let them figure that out. What that says on that." So we went on home, and it was done with the bed and everything. Well, it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and here comes Don out there and beating on the door. He said, I just went up there and said, "I want to know something." He said, "It says 80 on that," but he said, "The man marking it said it was 60. So they told him, "You better go for the man that marks it then, South. He probably knows what he was talking about." And he said them people got mad and argued and wanted to fight and everything else. So they said, "Well, you folks said it says 80 on it, so anybody can see that." So, but they was pretty bad to do stuff like that back in. And
Earl was I liked his personality. He knew how to have fun. As we got on into the later full-bodied cars, share with us the tap springs he used to use on the back of that.
We tried every spring I guess you could find. Everything was in a junkyard. But anyway, we wound up with some shorter springs on it, and they were stiff springs on the back, and they run in line with the frame. And that's the reason we could go to Buffalo Valley and run so good down there, because you needed stiff springs down there, in that turn and atomic too. So, but the springs that was on the front, one time one of them got twisted. It fell out when they ran it for 2 weeks like it was laying in there sideways. They kept telling me how bad it was driving. So I looked under it one day and I said, "Why don't you put the spring back in the bucket then? It might help it." He said, "You think that?" I said, "There it is." So we had to jack it up. I don't know how he got it out, but we had to try a problem putting it back in, but we got the spring back in it, and it sure did help a lot.
Weren't those rear springs out of a house trailer?
There was a trailer. I don't know what kind of trailer there was, but they're short springs for something. It probably was.
One of those, probably that same car. He played with other competitors' minds quite a bit too. He had the differential in it offset to one side.
About all of our cars was offset to one side.
This one was offset
a lot. He had the shortened axles on it. So the axles were pretty high back then. We didn't want to buy 2 axles. So what we done, we moved one short axle, a real short axle, and left a long axle on the other side, in the right side, and we moved a chunk over to the quick change end and moved it over to the left side. But we also had the motor and transmission both moved. Everything was moved to the left side. We had run short A-arms on the left side and longer A-arms on the right side to get all the weight on the left side of it.
Now, tell me, share with us a story about the differential gears you had in that too.
Before we run the quick change, and with the flatheads, old flatheads didn't have 100 horsepower to start with, and then of course, we'd added some to them, and they might have been running 140 or something like that. I don't know. It wasn't a lot of horsepower. But we figured out a long time there, right quick, you had to get all you could get out of that. You couldn't let nothing run in a bind. It killed that horsepower. And so run it through the transmission. We started out running it through the transmission, and we was running second gear, and we had 2 transmissions, and that way I swapped them every week. I'd pull one out, put the other in, we're running a different track. And we had a 28 tooth and a 29 tooth. Well, he come up the ID said, that if we didn't have to use that transmission, that thing would have more power. So he calls, I believe it's Schaefer or somebody, whoever built the thing, they built a ring gear and pinion for it. And that was the awfulest looking thing I ever seen, because the pinion shaft was bigger than the ring. It was a 669 or something like that, about a 670 ratio. And they said that was the lowest thing they could build. And we run it in high gear. That way we didn't have to run through the transmission. And it actually, I believe it helped it some. That flathead actually picked up a little more speed.
He would get protested sometimes because he was torquing it out of the motor instead of wringing it out of it. And everybody that didn't know better would think that he had to be running too much stroke or he couldn't have pulled that. They didn't know he could buy that ratio rear end with it.
Like I said, that he had figured what it was overall. We had a little old calculator thing, and it was a little paper thing, and we figured it was that, the size of the tires, how long the track was. We had actually went and measured the track, see how far it was around it to get the length on it. And it come out to be about a 670 to make that thing turn about 5,500 RPMs.
Well, let me ask you, then on one occasion he won a feature at 2 different tracks.
Yeah, it was on they was going to run on, it was late in the year, they was running on Sunday evening, and somehow or another they wound up, they was going to run at Burgess Falls and also at Cookville. So we went to Burgess Falls, and Paul and went to Cookville. And when we got up there, it was drizzling rain. They didn't have many cars there. Because they split them up so much. And I don't know, it's probably 15, 20 miles about between them, I guess, something like that. Anyway, we'd always pull the left rear axle out because we're towing it in, and we'd have to pull the left rear axle out, unlock the rear end, and we'd have to put a little tar on the right front to keep it from pushing the car sideways. So when he started the race, I told him, I said, you're starting up front. He had fast time. I said, don't look back. I said, when you come in, we're going to throw that tow bar on that thing. We're going to Cookville. He said, well, we don't get there in time to maybe run a feature. I said, it don't make no difference. I said, we're going to run twice today. So we was laughing. And they just run a 60-lap race that day. And I think it's 60 lap. Anyway, he started on front, and he led every lap. And they never had a wreck. It didn't have no caution or nothing. Well, it didn't take just a few minutes to hit that run. When he come in, we just threw the tow bar on it and hooked it to the car. He jumped in the car, and I got in the hot rod. I didn't pull no axle out. I just jumped in the hot rod, and I'd hold the steering wheel where it would run straight down the road. And he went up the road there about 3 miles, and I'd been up there about 2 weeks before that with Wayne Dunlap and them. I went up there to the fire, and we went to the Cookville fire. So, and we'd like to miss the turn up there, a little short turn there. And we was going up there, and I thought, you better be slowing down. That old 56-4 we had, it was just bellowing them pipes, And I was in the hot rod, and I had enough. I just rested, got the brakes on it, and I went scooting the wheels, and he was still getting to the gas. And we shot around that turn. I bet we were running 90 mile an hour going around that turn. And we went on up there, and so we got there, and we went through the gate up there. They said, just as we went through the gate, they said, you got 1 minute to time in. Well, I just kicked her up in second gear there and fired it up. And when he got out, the old tow bar we had, which was on the old sedan we had before, you could just pull it out as a pin went from one side to the other. He jerked that tow bar out and had his helmet on. I don't think he ever took the helmet off from the other track down there. Well, I got out one window, he went in the other window, and we went out there, and he got fast time. And I know Paul Walker and them, they had fast time. Oh, they had a fit. They said, here you come running in up here and got our money. So.
And for you guys that don't know, him and Paul worked with each other. They had to see each other every day.
Yeah, they worked together every day, and of course, they was always gigging each other all the time. And Bernard Smith drove for Paul, and they was down there sometime down standing. It wasn't they? It was in the back room. You could hear them go out on the road.
Where was you think was probably Earl's all-time favorite track that he probably liked better than any?
I don't know if he had a favorite or not. We run good at the Winchester track had some real good clay on it, and you had down there. If you had a car that handled good, it would really handle good down there, and it would get a bite down there. I've walked across that track and it'd pull your shoes off. You have too sometimes.
Right.
The clay was so good. But now the Burgess Falls track and the Cookville track, I'd say we won more races there than anywhere, and we won at Macmillan too. And he run it. We went up in Kentucky at some, and then on the last year they got to go in Alabama, of course, and run it down there in that cotton field down there.
You may or may not remember this. Can you remember a 100-lap race that he almost won?
Well, I know he won some, but some he didn't win. So the
one I was thinking about, and I know there was a lot of them, I think he blowed the engine on the last lap or right next to the last lap, and they wound up giving him a trophy with a broken rod on it.
The bad luck trophy.
For that, because he had led everything up until that happened. I know when you're good like he was, and he was, I don't think there was ever any better than he was on a dirt track. Not taking anything away from anybody else, but did he ever have any really bad altercations with other drivers?
Well, if you're going to run, and I don't care where you run at, if you really going to put her up there, they're going to rub every now and then. So you had some hard feelings, but I think that was about it. And what I always liked about the racing bunch, I think you can even say that yourself. They may fuss and rattle at the track, but when they went home, if they something happened to one of them, or a family or something, they'd be right there to help. They was a family all together. I mean, really, they
were a brotherhood.
Yeah, they was a brotherhood because they stuck together.
We were a carnival every weekend.
It was showtime.
That was a place. That was a place.
And everybody goes to the track. You don't go to the track and be a loser. You go into the track. You're going to be a winner headed to the track. So everybody wants to be a winner. So I mean, they're going to get together sometime or another.
I know we used to put our little counties we were from, and Earl would usually put on the back of his car from Smart, Tennessee.
Smart Station.
I remember that. Yeah.
Sometimes he'd simply have Smart.
Yeah,
Tennessee.
one of them, they changed. See, what they of course, where we lived out there, it was Smart Station. Well, then they lost the station. Of course, that was the train run through there, and then the post office there, they put Smart on the post office, Smart, Tennessee. And I remember back 2 or 3 years ago, I seen on TV one day, and they said, the craziest name I ever seen was a Smart, Tennessee. I said, well, I know where that's at.
Well, did you ever hear him say anything about who was his toughest competitor at a certain track, or he'd say, I'd have to beat old Hoghead or whoever if I'm going to win this?
Well, they used to laugh at me. Paul and them did, said that I'd sit on my hind end and wouldn't do nothing, and said then when you see one of them beer wagons, I used to call them beer wagons, that was Budweiser and all that bunch of sponsored cars. Now, when you see one of them roll in, you better get up and get busy because they had money and they come to run. Now, you better get your best games on then. That was the only ones I ever really dreaded. But now, I don't know. He just enjoyed it.
I think he did too. He liked being out there, and I think the tougher they got, the better he liked it. He could compete with any of them on any of them's level too.
That was his A game. That was always in that car was his A game. So that's the way it went. Paul and them was friends with a guy up in East Tennessee. He come down and run with us. I don't know if you remember or not. Paul Ghost. The Ghost, he come down every now and then, and he'd run with us, and he told us one time. He said, "Man, I've been all over the country." He just come from Wisconsin. He said, "Y'all about the hardest bunch I ever run with anywhere." Said that's competition out there.
Well, old Paul Ghost, I guess, ran a flathead longer than anybody, and they used to pay him to come to different tracks to beat overhead valve engines, and he did a lot.
Right, yes. He
Paul
had a,
Ghost was good, but
he was
Earl
good.
was as good.
hey, that's what Paul said one time. He said that track there, when he come down there, he said, y'all got some good handling cars and good running cars. And he said, I ain't got nothing on y'all now.
Yeah, he was quite a guy, Paul was.
Well, now tell us about the last race in McMahon, 2 or 3 weeks before that.
We had run that year. There's the last race right there. They run it at the speedway by the VFW. We'd run a 100 lapper with that old car, and it was of course it was getting the end of the year, and we'd run a championship or two, and they had one race left. Well, the 100 lapper we'd run, man, that thing run, and he was just freed up, just free as a bird. It was singing. And anytime they do that, you're getting the best out of them, and it's getting towards the end. You're fixing to have to do something. And we went back the next week, and the old motor was wore, and it was blowing oil out and smoking. Well, it was smoking a little, wasn't bad, but it lost its stink. I mean, it just lost its power. So I told Dad, I said, when I get out of school tomorrow, I said, when I get home, I said, I'll pull that motor out of that thing. I said, you give us a set of rings for it. And I said, we'll freshen it up. And that time he said, the rings, and of course it had them little narrow rings on it. And he said, them rings are high. He said, this is the last race. And he said, we got 2 327s we're going to run next year, done built. And he said, I ain't spending that much on it. And I said, well, it ain't going to run. I said, if you don't get a set of rings for that thing, I said, I'll pull it out, get it tore apart, and you just get a set of rings, and we'll just freshen it up and lap valves in and put it back together. No, I ain't spending that on it. So he went out to run that race, and they, which I didn't know it till even back last year, but I was working down there at the service station. Of course, I worked that all the time, and then I was working on them mail trucks and stuff, cleaning them up and servicing them and some more stuff. And Johnny Cutes and them come by, and they said, ain't you going to the racing? I said, no, I got to get this done. I said, I ain't going. I said, that old car won't run. I said, it's wore out. I said, it just ain't going to run. I said, no, they did. It didn't seem like it had gone long. They come back, and I said, what y'all done back? And they said, that's over with. I said, who won? And they said, your daddy did. And I said, no, he didn't. And I said, that thing wouldn't run. He said, well, it did. So he outrun the rest of them. And said he started up front and said he didn't look back. Said he just kept running. That's another one of them races they run at the end of the year. They never did stop. It was just an open race there. And so I went on out there, and he always laughed at me about. He said I was ashamed of him that I wouldn't go with him at that time. He said I showed you, and but he come find out he didn't tell me that till just a year or so ago. He changed gears in that thing, went in that gearbox, and he ain't no telling how many RPMs to turn. And he had it 2 quarts over full when he started. And when the race over, when they tore the old motor down, I bet they went 1/4 oil in it. It was more oil on top of the pistons than they was an oil pan. But he said if they ever stopped that race, he said they'd eat him up. So I said, well, you had to foul the plugs out probably. And but it was running on oil because it was the rings was just lost their tension and they was gone. But yeah, like I said, he got by with it. And he put a new tire on the right rear, and of course it was on Sunday, and that thing got a good bite, and no car handled good. So,
and he could drive it.
It was good.
I would need to ask you one other thing. He started out using number 414. How come he changed to just 14 as years went by?
Well, we started with 414, and I tell you how it come, because we didn't have no money and didn't have nothing to spend on it, and we built the thing in the backyard. And when he went to put a number on it, we didn't have a sign painter, and we couldn't afford one. So over there where he worked at that time, he was working at a shoe factory, and he'd worked on a weekend over there, and they took that yellow wide tape and made the lines in the floor. Well, he brought part of that roll home with him, and there's where we got the numbers at. We couldn't make circles, we couldn't make a 2, so we had to go up and down. Well, they done had a 41, and then so we just made 414 out of it, out of that tape. And it run, of course, it was on there for a long time. And anyway, then when we got the coupe, we just put 14 on the coupe. We just took a 4 off of it, and we run 14 and 414 for several years there. And then when they at the end, when they didn't want to score 3 numbers. Miss Gilda told us, Peanut's wife, she done the scoring. She said, y'all going to have to take one of them numbers off. She said, we're having too much trouble scoring all them cars with 3 numbers on. So we just used the 14 then and went on with the 14. And so that's how we wound up with just a 14 on it.
Well, do you know how many years he actually did race?
No, not exact. He started, like I said, probably before he started fooling with it. But I mean, as far as running good, we started with that old 414. That was like 57, and he was still racing. He was driving somebody else's car because the last year there, we borrowed his car to run. A friend of mine did, and but I'd say he run on up to 2000, somewhere along in there, close to it. I tell you what, we run until everybody had store-bought cars, and we never had a store-bought car. We had to have a homemade car.
Right.
And when they went to running factory chassis and they got into all the shocks and stuff like that we was out. That was pretty well. That was pretty well wound us up.
Well, I know you drove some, but why did you not pursue a racing career like he did?
Well, it was hard to make a change. It was almost impossible. Me and him couldn't make a change. I couldn't drive it like he drove it, and he thought I ought to. So, but anyhow, I told him, I said, oh, he wanted that thing flat. He wanted it just flat. He could somehow or another he could pitch it just a little, get it in the turn, and that was it. I never could do that. I had to get the thing. He had to make the turn for me pretty well. I wanted to go around the turn. I just wanted to turn right. And but anyhow, I could ask him about what it was doing. If he wasn't sitting in that seat, he couldn't tell you nothing about it. And but then and I couldn't tell sitting in the seat what it was doing. I had the car boy with me to ask him. He didn't know nothing about racing, but I could ask him what it was doing, and he could, and I could adjust it then.
Well, I know he used to share this with me. Tell us about him laying the old flathead Fords. He'd lay the car in the ditch sometimes and change rod bearings in it instead of jacking it up.
I don't believe he ever changed rod bearings. I think he just checked the bearings. He'd want to check the bearings every now and then, and so we didn't have a rack, and it was hard. It took a lot longer when you jack one up, you know. So they was a ditch, and we just put it in the ditch, and we'd take the old boom truck to the tractor one, flip it over, and you could lay a tar down with a tube in it, you know, without a rim, and it won't even skin one up. I've done that a lot of times, you know. We just flipped it up on that tar there, and you could stand up and take that oil pan. Man, you could take that oil pan off of it in 5 minutes, check the bearings in it, and put it back together, and lay it back down, fill it back up with oil, and you're ready to go.
I thought it was a pretty good idea myself. I just didn't have a ditch that would fit mine as good as he did. I know there's been lots of good stories out there, but can you think of one that stands out to you, Gary, more than anything else over the years that it just comes to mind that you remember this happening to this day?
Well, the where we won 2 in one day, that was probably the best day we ever had, you know. Which that was with old flathead, you know, and but that was probably one of the best days we'd ever had, because when you can win 2 in one day at 2 different tracks, that's a good day. Yeah. And it was. I would say, I like to say this. I'm glad I got to grow up with all y'all. I started when I was 6 years old and stayed there all that time. And I think, I don't know, sometimes I think I belong to everybody there, because
you still do.
And because I just growed up with everybody, and it was a pleasure to get to do that.
It really was. It really was a family. It really was a brotherhood.
I never played much ball. I'd have to at school or something. They'd want me to play with them sometimes. I could hit the ball, but I couldn't run. So, but anyway, I tried to tell them one time when I started high school. I said, they want me to play ball, and I said, look, I I got something to play with better than that. I said, I got a race car, or 2 or 3 of them most of the time. But
Well, now tell us about the deal that, like you talking about Middle Tennessee Speedway or Buffalo Valley, that you could tell by the sound of what jet you had to swap out.
it was at Burgess Falls and Cookville. That Flathead was. That's what I loved about the Chevrolet. And I was a Chevrolet man myself. Daddy liked Flatheads, and I like Chevrolet. You know, them old Chevrolets, you can get them within 10 sizes on jets, and they still run. It didn't make no difference with them. But that Flathead, it was sentimental. You got to stay with it. But now, we run up there like you run at Buffalo, at Burgess Falls, the worst place. The back straight was uphill, the front straight was downhill. And when that thing come off that hill, it better be cackling them pipes. And if it wouldn't, you had to work on it because it'd go flat. And so we carried 2 distributors with us. And then back in, they had 2 sets of points in them. And as the points, I think it was like almost impossible to set 2 sets of points at a track, especially when it was down on the front of it and you couldn't get to it. So we just swapped distributors out in it. And then we'd change the jets in the carburetor. And we had the jets, we had a jet range with them. It didn't take but a minute to change them jets in it. I will tell you this, what happened there, and I learned with that thing, and then it went on with the Chevrolets too. If the track got dry slick, which Randall will tell you the same thing, if you're spinning the wheels, you're not covering no ground. You got to get a bite if you're going to run up front. And so if it's spinning the wheels, you got to get the power off of it. You got to get it all quick. So what we done, like on the Flathead, where the squirt pump was at for the carburetor, where it squirted the gas in the carburetor, right under that was a power valve. That was your big power valve. And we learned if that thing spun, the wheels coming off a turn or something or other, all I had to do was disconnect that rod and it'd stop it from spinning wheels. You just slow the gas down on the thing. Then when we got into the Chevrolets, they was worse. And they would, you had to watch the track and all that. I know one night we was fumbling around and laughing and talking probably as usual, and the track got away from us. And it was, it was a good tacky track out there, man. Well, and we'd been, running like that, and it was in the summertime, and it done got hot, and the track got away from us. And they started the race. Man, they was one on each side and one bumping in the back, and that thing was blocking the track from one end to the other. And I thought, God, I got to do something right quick. I was fumbling around there, and what we do on the 4-barrel part of it, all the butterflies was the same size in it. We run the big jets in front and the little jets behind. We was backers from what everybody else was because we could run on 2-barrel. And that's what we do. We just disconnect the 4-barrel. It had that little kinky linkage in there that pulled the 4-barrel on it, and it was squirrely as it could be. And so I thought they'll run over him. Cat's cousin there, Raymond, was running right behind him. Well, they run 5 or 6 laps and they stopped the race. They'd had a little wreck or something. So I run down there and they got on me said, you can't work on it on the track. I said, I ain't gonna work on it. I got to see what's wrong about that mud ball on the wires there. So when they started the race back in, that thing had a different sound. I don't know why it would make a deeper sound on a 2-barrel than it would on a 4-barrel. And he just pulled away from them. And they were spinning the wheels and he drove away from them. And when the race was over with, they kept saying I'd worked on it. And the flagman said, no, he didn't either. I stayed right there and watched it. He didn't work on it, didn't I? I said, I ain't gonna tools. I didn't carry no tools with him. And Raymond said, Earl, I don't know what the boy done for you, but said he helped you a lot. I know that.
Him and Raymond was pretty good friends too.
Yeah.
Everybody was good friends with Raymond. I guess you done told us why he did decide to quit, but why did he never not want to race at the fairground? I know he went down there a lot with Don Hobbs.
Well, actually, we did race down there a time or two. That's when that track was so steep. And we run down there. We had run all year. That was in '68. And had the Coops then. And Don had one, we had one. They'd been in Alabama and they'd been at Winchester. And they'd won every race at Winchester and the whole year. They'd had a good year. Don kept telling me, because I was working for Don. Don said, we're flying. Oh, we're flying. He kept telling me how fast he was. And So the other year when they had the north-south race down at the fairground, we was going to go. And we went and carried them to coops. They went down on Saturday, and I had to work on Saturday, and then I went down on Sunday. And so they, when they come in on Saturday evening, it was about dark, and Don jumped out and he said, "You going out and do something? That right front wheels waste tire all the time." We had run them old homemade wheels with a bar steel welded around them for scuffer bars on them, rebar on them. And them things was out of bounds. Of course, they had recap tires. And he said, "That right front wheels waste tire all the time." I said, "It can't be. It's got to hit the ground sometime." He said, "It don't neither." I said, it's all ground. Well, I pulled them wheels off there. Well, we had running them little old aluminum hubs on with the flathead Ford brakes on. And they was running. That's when we figured out they was running a lot faster down there than what we'd been running. And when you touched the brakes on, it would jerk the linings off of them. And
That's what I was going to ask you about.
So we had to take, and it would jerk the band out of it would get hot and jerk the band out of that hub. That hub was aluminum and just had that band kind of stuck in it, poured in one. Well, we wound up turning both cars apart and taking both of them and trying to make one to go back with on Sunday. And I asked Dave, I said, "How come you don't want to take the little coupe back?" And he said, "I've had enough." That's all he said. "I've had enough." He said, "Put the pieces over on the other one, and we'll get one going down there and get Don's back going." He said, "His old car actually, I believe, will handle better than ours will down there." And our old car always handled good everywhere. Well, I went down there on Sunday. Of course, they went on, and I went down later. And I wound up, all I was going to tell you was, you could take a chunk of, they wasn't enough lead in Warren County to bounce them wheels. You could put, I bet, 10 pounds of lead on them, and it still wouldn't be round. So I went over at Paul Walker's. I know Paul had 2 new wheels. I don't think he'd ever even used. I borrowed them, and we put them on the outside, and then I bounced to the left front, and we picked out the best and we had out of both cars and put on the left rear and kind of bounced them up. And I told him, I said, "Y'all gonna kill somebody, that lead flies off them things." So, but they went back down there. But them cars, that was in 1968, in the fall, and them cars darted and zigzagged, and they couldn't get beside each other. None of them could. I mean, and them like Hooker Hood was there, and little Holly and them out of West Memphis, Arkansas, on them skeeters and stuff, and they was having, and Griggs was having trouble with them. And I know Hooker come over and sat down there, and on the fenders of our trailer, and we was talking, and they said, "Well, this right here winds up." That wind was blowing a crosswind that day across that track, and they was darting and a zigzag, and that was in 68, and we went back in 69, which in the spring, with a 57 Chevrolet with the same motor in it, and we did have rounder wheels on it though. We did buy a set of wheels for it, and we run faster with the 57. And I bet the 57 weighed, it was heavy. I bet it weighed 3 times more than that coupe did. But that's when we figured out covering them wheels and tires up, they would run faster. But now what Dad told me down there that day when we was talking about it, I said something about it. He said, "When you go in that turn right there," he said, "I can't see the car in front of me." He said, "All I can see is asphalt." And he said, "I don't know where the track's at, but," he said, I can't even see a car in front of it." And I told him, I said, "Well, if we cut that top out a little more," and he said, "No." He said, "You can't." He said, "It's just like running into a blind wall."
It was like he was hanging off something.
Yeah, he said it. He said, "I ain't running like that. If I can't see where I'm at, I'm not running like that." So, but we went back, like I said, with the 57 then and run with them and run, and Don drove the 57, and we done really good with the thing. Of course, we got, of course, like everybody else, we got rich with it,
Yeah.
We won a race there one night, and he run 40 laps. And we actually won the race. We were about mid-season there. We won the race, and it paid $400 to win the race. They won with one problem. We put on 4 new tires when we started, and they was $140 a piece, and it wore out all 4 of them.
That was
at 40 laps.
Yeah, you could win and still lose on asphalt.
We won and didn't tear up nothing. Come home and it broke.
Well, I know that particular year, 68 or whatever it was, a lot of the dirt track racers
Went down there.
and it was an open competition type thing, but nobody did handle good down there. The car,
Nobody didn't handle it. That wind was blowing, I think, crossways across
the
that
cars
track.
only weighed about 1,400 pounds.
Yeah, and they had a lot of horsepower.
Right. And they was trying to leave the ground. Really, is what was taking place.
Well, they couldn't even get beside each other. I mean, they were scared to get beside each other because they was darting, zigzagging back and forth across the track. And if you come off the turn against the wall, you'd be on the inside of the wall before you got halfway down the track. And so it was kind of scary, really. But that wound. We was talking about that day down there. You know, that wound them cars up right there.
You can lay a 2x4 across the top of it and lift it off.
They wasn't nothing on the ground, that's for sure.
That did make a lot of people, including me, want to go down there and race some, though.
Well, we like '69, and of course they closed the track at Mount Level in '67, and then that '68, like I said, we run down Alabama. We run we was down there. We run with Farmer and all that bunch down there, and they runs a fairground down at Huntsville. And then down there down towards Muscle Shoals, they had a track. There's 3 tracks down there I think we'd run.
There was Muscle Shoals, Decatur, and
Decatur's where the cotton fields at, wasn't it?
Yeah.
If you run off the track, you didn't have to worry about it. You had a soft landing. It's out in the middle of the cotton field.
Everybody needed to run at Decatur at least once, though. And I think most of us got around to it.
Yeah, and it was now. We had run earlier. We're running Kentucky some, and but that was a hard pull going to Kentucky and back. The longer after we run the asphalt down there, we run down there. Let's say we run that about a year. We'd built an old 55 Chevrolet, and I told Dad one day, I said I want to drive. He said okay. Well, we built a motor. I felt to put an old motor together, a pretty good motor. And putting the 55, and it was the end of the year. That's probably '69 or '70, somewhere along in there. And we went up the other side of to the right of Knoxville, back down there. I can't remember what the name of the track was, but anyway, we went up there, run up there with Schweissgood, and that bunch was running up there. All them big blocks, and Spring City's where it was at. Went up the hill. You had to have a good truck to get it up the hill with it, up across the railroad track and up that hill. And but anyhow, we run up there. Well, we got up there, and like I said, I just threw tires on it, what we had, and it was wore out, whatever. And I know that I thought I was going to drive. Well, they said, "Well, I better try it out, make sure it's all right for you." I never did get in. That was his main thing. He was the driver, and but we worked out better, me as pit man and him the driver, for our benefit anyway.
Well, I know you did drive some, and I thought you was doing pretty good myself. Now, Larry D. Long, and is a good friend of mine, yours both. Did you ever race with him?
Oh, yeah. I got into something there I didn't mean to get into. Larry, we'd racing, we'd run hobby out there. Well, of course, I'd work for Don and stuff, and Don would always tell me how to drive, They never would tell me. He never did tell me much, But anyway, Don, he said, now, one spins out in front of him. He said, all you got to do is run at him. So he'll be gone when he get there. That's wrong. Larry spun that one out there, and I could have missed him on either side. I hit him just his head. He just spun around and stopped all at once. I mean, just right in his tracks. I hit him just his head on could be. You could match the headlights up. I hit him hard. and so that was wrong. Don't believe everything you hear,
Y'all figured that out.
We figured that out right quick. So you can ask Larry, we hit hard that night. But I run there, I guess 2 or 3 years in the hobby. Of course, I drove a thing some. I drove in, when they have a mechanics race, I'd always drive and hit. And they got to run there one year. They run 2 or 3 mechanics races and all. And that old boy was flagging from Winchester up there. He was flagging at Mount Level. He said, let me tell you something. If you run as good as you're running, you ain't getting back here. You come back next one, you're running with a hobby bunch. So they put me in the hobby bunch, and I run there for a while. And now that was education. So I think some of that bunch there was there to see what they could run over, and other baby been there to run up front. But anyway, we had a good time.
You're right.
But then I wound up selling the hobby car, and so they got on, and he said he was wanting to quit anyway. So he started driving for George and Lester and them, and he drove there for a year or so for them. So two friends at work, of course, me and Joe went to school together all the time, and we grew up together. Hey, we got talking about, they went to the racing. Well, they got talking about the racing. You know what that is? When you start talking about it, it gets more exciting all the time. We talked about it for about a week, and he said, we need us a car. He said, where do we get a car at? So I went today and told him, I said, I need, we want to borrow your car. And that was that last Chevy too. And he said, okay. He said, y'all just have at it then. So we run the year, and we went run the modified class. And I drove the thing, and I had, like I said, I had Joe there to kind of tell me which direction I need to go in. And so we done a little bit of adjustment on it, and I had a good year. We run second or third all year. And so, I mean, I didn't tear up nothing. I thought, I was here. But running with the older modified bunch, I loved it, because if you got out of shape, they'd stop waiting on you to catch back up. So they would, it was a whole lot better than beating it a banging like it. We didn't tear up nothing. But at the end of the year, we had paid our own way in, and Joe would pull a little car with his truck stuff, and we had put everything we'd won there, and I thought we'd done pretty good. We'd won a heat race too, and we, 3 or 4 something other, and had a good year, I thought. Well, we went to put all the pieces back on that thing that we'd wore out. Of course, the old motor needed freshening up, and we didn't have enough to do nothing with it. We needed to buy a set of tires. We needed this, and I told Joe, I said, look, I said, we're at a place right here. I said, all these factory-built cars that now, I said, if we're going to go on, we're going to have a factory chassis. I said, this homemade stuff this ain't getting it no more. You got to have.
It's too heavy.
It's too heavy and all that, and you got to have factory chassis on it. And you got to have a better set of tires than what we've been running. So he said, how much is that going to cost? And I said, a lot. And that's when we decided we had to make a decision where we was getting in or getting out. We was at the crossroads right there.
Now, before we let this get away from us, I've got you to share the recent story.
Okay.
About this.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
This is one of the first cars that we had. It was the 414, and it had been gone nearly 60 years. And I went about 35 years ago, so I went to Cookville. I know it went up there, and I hunted for it, and I went to house and asked what happened to the thing, and nobody didn't know nothing. And I stopped down there, and I seen one of the flats, Howard, I think it was. Howard said that, I was asking him about it, and he said, there's a guy come through buying junk, and he said, they bought 2 or 3 more cars, and he said, I'm sure it went to Crusher. That's where it was going to Crusher. So I give up. That was it. I wasn't going to hunt for it no more. And since these guys here has got this started, they have found my car for me and yours. So, and I'll have to thank them. We'll have to thank them for them finding it, because we'd have never found it had been for this. It was on the Buffalo Valley Speedway, and Jackson put on there. They put a little video on it about these 2 old cars in this thicket up here, and I thought it was at Buffalo Valley. When I first read that. Well, they'd run it there, and Roy, of course, Roy's our friend, as always, he's fixing up old car stuff. Every time he sees something, he'll send it to me and say, now, whose was this? And what number was this? And whose was this? He sent that to me, and I come in, my wife told me, she said, now, Roy sent you something, I want you to look at some pictures on Facebook, said, you need to look that up, see what he's wanting there. So I looked at it, and just as soon as it opened up, it showed that back window of that old sedan. And I know what I told my wife, I said, that's 414 right there. I can tell you exactly what that is. And she said, oh, you can't tell rusty as that thing is. They had the trim cut out around it and all. And so, and I told her, I said, it is. I said, that's it. Well, he walked around then, and that on the side, it used to say Warren County Furniture. And right there's you can take this picture right there. And there the car was back years ago. See, it said Warren County Furniture on top, but all that was gone off of it. But over the wheel wells on the right, both sides there, it said Complete Home Furnishing Owner Herman Medley. Well, on one side you could read the Herman, and on the other side you could read the Medley. So there was only, and we went to hunting, me and my wife went to hunting the pictures up. This picture right there, with me and my sister there, was the only picture that we could find of that car. And it was lucky that the car was even in it, because I'd washed the old car. And my mother come out of the house with my sister and said if you'll hold her just a minute, I'll take y'all's picture. Well, I just sat down on that kicker rail on that thing and held her up, because she wasn't even walking then. And she took a picture. So, but I put that picture on there, and they said, well, that is the car. And so I got hold of the boy, Jackson, McClear, and anyway, he called me back, and he said, I asked him where the cars was at, and he said they was up at Moss, Tennessee, and he races in Nashville, and he had his great uncle number 7. Jerry was a great uncle, and he said it was on their farm up there, and said the girls went on a place. So he gave me a number, and I called that number, and she didn't answer the phone the first time, and then directly she called me back. Nicest lady I've ever met in my life. And of course, she was into racing. So we got to talking about it, and I told her, she said, I'm sure that's your car. She said, she done seen it on there, seen the picture and everything on it. And I said, are there any way I could come look at this thing? She said, yes, you come right on up here. Well, she told me where it was at. And so she wanted to be there on the weekend. So we went up there, me and Joe and David did. And that day we went, it was so cold you couldn't stand it hardly. But we got out and went down there to the thicket. And they cleared out around it. Of course, he had a dozer in there. He was clearing up the farm. And her son was. But anyway, I said, yeah, that's it. I said, that's the car. Whoa, there's a coupe in front of it. And we got to trying looking at it, trying to figure it out. Well, Joe and I said, it's too cold. I'm going to get back in the car. So they got back in there, and I said, well, I've never seen one with fenders on it. Somebody's got fenders on that thing and run around here. So I got to looking up, trying to look everything up, see where it was at. And so anyway, I asked her, I said, what's your intention to do with these things? She said, nothing. I just want to, said, he's fixing to doze them up, you know. I said, do not doze these things up. I said, don't crush them. I said, because this is our history right here. This is our life right here, you know. And she said, okay. I said, I won't. She said, well, then they found out that, she said, now, I've got a sister, so I have to check with her and see what she says about it. I said, okay, you just check with her and let me know then. Well, it went on about a week. And she called me. She said, my sister went. She said, they didn't even know it was there. Her sister didn't even know there. She said it'd been there so many years. So they called back. She said, my sister said, tell that little boy to come get his car. And that, of course, I was a little boy in that picture. She didn't know I was an old man now. So we made the deal, you know. I said, what about the other one? What about the coupe? She said, I told her, I said, I've got a friend. I said, he restores cars, old race cars. I said, he enjoys it. And I said, I have not got time to do both of them. I said, I'd like to, but I got a friend. I said, Roy, I said, well, I let Roy have that. And I said, we'll just come get them. She said, well, let me make sure my sister's okay with her. So she did. So she told us on Sunday, that'd be the next Sunday, to come get them. Well, we met, Randall went along to help us. And we met him over at the shopping center. We headed up there. Roy and Randall was together, and me and David and Joe was. And we, it was a fluke just to find to start with. But then I couldn't believe what happened when we got up there. we turned in up there and went up to the farm, and there was a crowd there, wasn't there, Randall?
I mean, I've seen smaller crowds at racetracks.
They had picked them up and carried them up on top of the hill and moved them out for us where we could load them. Well, so when we got there and we pulled in there, we got out, Randall got out and walked up there, and I was looking at one, and we went over and I was looking at the other, and I looked over and Randall backed up, and his face was just as white as it could be. I thought, what's wrong with you? I thought he's sick or something. And Joe said, voice me said, what's wrong with him? And I said, what's the matter, Randall? Randall said, his chin got a quiver. He said, that's my car. And so not only did we find mine, we found his was up there. And he said, it's got square tube and roll bars in it, which I can remember the square tube and roll bars in it. And I done looked at the top in it with with aluminum insert in it with aircraft rivets in
Right.
it. And so, but anyhow, he said, if it's got a Volkswagen gas tank in it, he said, I know it's mine. And well, it did. I said, look at the top on it, Randall. And he looked, and he said, yeah. He said, my daddy and what was Jack Todd put that in there. And we was laughing then about Jack, of course, worked down there at the trailer place. And all them old tops he tore off them trailers, them aluminum tops. He furnished us aluminum. Every car we ever had a Jack Todd floorboard in it,
And top.
and top.
If it had a top.
If it had a top, it come down there. Jack would always bring that old scrap stuff on with it, and we'd use it. And even my street rod, the hood on my street rod's got it's the last piece of Jack Todd's aluminum. So, but anyhow, I said, I don't believe it. That's hard. It was just hard to believe that we found two cars from Warren County that far away from home and them right together.
And there was so much of them still there. His tow bar was still there. The old brackets that had been welded on that in the mine were still there. It was. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He's right. I usually can say something about anything, but
He couldn't say nothing.
I don't know what to say about that one.
Left him speechless.
Yeah. And then we told them, Donna there, that one of the girls that owned it, I said, that's his car. And she said, you kidding? I said, it's his car.
And it really is.
So we got him loaded. Well, before we even loaded, Randall told me and Roy, he said, I don't care what y'all say. That's my car. It's going home with me. So we got them loaded up, and we spent the evening up there. Really enjoyed the time with them. It was really
good
They
good.
were
people.
super people. And
Good people.
I'm with Gary. This deal that y'all are doing here, had it not been for that, we'd have never found those cars. And,
Never, because
they
nobody
made
didn't
a
even
lot
know it
to
was
us.
there. I mean, they'd been there for years and years, and we still ain't. The lady there, she's got in on it, and they're trying to find out the history on it, how they got there. We still don't know how they got there.
Huh.
And they had somehow or another they had brought them there, and I'd say because the big rim's going out of theirs, and the rim's going out of the one you
Yep.
had. They evidently took the rims out of them, and ours had a motor in it, so they sold the old flathead motor, I guess, or done something with it. And but they don't know how they wound up. We don't know how they wound up there, but we got them home. That's
Yeah.
and I've done got mine tore all two pieces. It's laying everywhere.
And Roy's got mine started back together.
And so we're trying to we're going to preserve history and get these things back together. And they never was slick. Now they was race cars. So, but if we can get them back with it, look good, and they halfway decent anyway. We want them to look good enough that we can show them and say this is history.
Anybody that has one of those old race cars, I hope they'll notify somebody not destroy them because they won't be around anymore. And these two cars, this is the same car that somebody restored, and the yellow one is a restored version of the.
That was the same car, and it sat there in front of our house for 30 years, I guess, wasn't it? And I was going to restore it sometime or other. Well, I was working all that overtime stuff, and one day I stopped down there and they said, "Are you ever going to fix that old car?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to." He said, "Well, you ain't done nothing yet on it." So I said, "Well, I kind of like coming by here every day because all my life that thing's been sitting right there." And he said, "There's two guys come today and want to know if they could have that thing or wanted to buy it or something other." And I said, let them have it. Well, the time I left there, I didn't get a mile down the road. I changed my mind. I thought, that thing, I've had that thing ever since I was a kid. I thought, I don't want to sell it. I'll stop tomorrow and tell him not to sell it. Well, that's too late. It was gone. And so the guy bought it, and he went to Alabama and bought that other body and put the body back on it and made a nice looking car out of it. And it was, they just showed it, and it was a good looking car. But like I said, I let that get away now. But I think, I best I remember, he just gave it to him. I don't even think he sold it to him. I think he just gave it to him. They'd fix it,
I think that's what happened with mine.
Well, I'll show this picture to David Bentley from Richmond, Virginia. I think he was originally out of Alabama. And he'll probably know where it's at.
but he went to Kentucky, but the body come out of Alabama. And I believe they said he bought that from somebody down there had a chicken house full of old cars and stuff, the body, and put on it. Now this picture right here is one that I think that's the only picture that we've ever found that's been my dad was together in. That's that picture right there. That was at the racetrack out there. And I know one thing. It'd been a rough week that week. I was wore out when that picture was made.
Well, I'll say this: his dad was a great guy, and when I started racing, I respected him so much. If he drove over the end of the turn, I'd have followed him over because I'd have figured that's where I needed to be. So I respected that guy.
Now, the first few years, you'd been over every other lap probably because he didn't stay on the track that much.
I did some of that too.
That the cars, I will say this, the cars that the old car went and got, the 414, which is right there, when I looked in it, it scared me. And I drove the thing some. That thing only had one roll bar in it, but up the windshield posts on both sides, he had angle iron shut up through there and bolts in it, but it only had one roll bar and didn't even have a brace in that thing. And when I was about, I don't know, I might have been 10 or something like that, we said up at Cool. I'd drive the track off. I'd get out there in the mud and all. And I was getting on it, and the rear end come around on it, and I hung it in the bank, and I thought, well, I ain't gonna let off this thing. I'll just hold it wide open. And I did, and that helmet, I hit that bank, and that helmet turned sideways on my head, and I couldn't see. And it got on top of that bank, I reckon. I didn't see it. It went down the front straight away, and I took the end out of the flag stand down there and knocked the flags down. And I remember Sandy Hollingsworth, he come down there to the pit then after I got it back off the bank. Then it come off that bank just like it was running on this floor. It just levels it being back out on the track. And but I didn't let up. I guess that's probably kept it up there.
That's what you do to a race car.
And anyway, I got back in the pit, and Sandy come down there, and he said, "Son," he said, "I know your old man's crazy, but I didn't know you was."
Well, Gary, we've had a lot of good stories. Like I say, I loved your dad to death. Is there anything that you would like to tell us that we hadn't asked about?
I think we pretty well covered everything. We'll remember stuff on and on, and
we're going to do this again.
Okay. Anyway, like I said, those stories going around and around. It's kind of like a guy he come down to see Dad when he was sick, right before he passed away, and he said, "I've heard these old stories 100 times." He said, "But they're still good." So they
believe me, they're true.
But I was just like to say, like I said, I was just glad that I got to grow up in the time I got to grow up with, and got to fool these old cars and stuff, and so I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. I still do.
Oh, I still enjoy seeing them.
My wife was telling me yesterday something about I'd like to have me an electric car, and she said, "Look," she said, "you got the garage full out here and the garage full out there at the other place," and said, "You're working in the backyard. I can't get in the garage." And she said, "Don't start another project."
Well, I think that about does it. Gary, thank you for coming.
Well, I think y'all, like I said, we'd never found them cars if it hadn't been for y'all.
Well, you're welcome on that.
Yeah. Glad we could help, kind of.
I'm glad you did.
We kind of helped, I guess. But appreciate you coming. For Tommy Guy, Randall Davis, this is Steve Winstead. We'll catch you again.